Less than 1% of Japan's population identifies as Christian. Despite this, Western-style church weddings have become incredibly popular in Japan, to the point where foreigners are often hired to officiate the ceremonies. There are even foreigners who work exclusively as professional officiants for weekend weddings. Since there are not enough actual churches, wedding halls styled after churches have been built to meet the demand. In countries like South Korea, churches can be found almost everywhere. But in Japan, despite being a neighboring country, churches are rarely seen. What is the real reason behind this? If you travel around Japan, you'll notice that finding a church or a cathedral is not easy, especially in popular tourist destinations like Tokyo and Osaka. Many hotels feature buildings resembling chapels, but these are used solely for weddings. In Japan, the idea of a church is often associated more with weddings than with religion. The religious landscape in Japan is unique. It is often said that the Japanese people practice 3 different religions throughout their lives. As children, they receive blessings at a Shinto shrine, they marry in a Christian-style ceremony in a church or hotel, and when they die, their funerals are typically held at a Buddhist temple, with their bodies cremated and their ashes enshrined. When attending a Japanese funeral, you'll likely be given salt by the bereaved to ward off evil spirits. Ashes are transferred using chopsticks, which is why passing food from one set of chopsticks to another is considered taboo in Japan, a cultural detail that many outsiders might find puzzling. But why does Japan have such a unique religious culture? There are several historical reasons for this. In the mid-16th century, during Japan's Sengoku period, the emperor was merely a figurehead, and the real power lay in the hands of the shogun. Local lords, known as daimyo, governed their regions and supported Christian missionaries in exchange for Western firearms and other trade goods. Some of these lords even converted to Catholicism. At its peak, almost 20% of Japan's population was Catholic, and Christianity seemed poised to become a major religion in Japan. However, this growth didn't last long. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who invaded East Asian countries, grew concerned that missionaries were causing unrest and converting innocent people. He accused them of destroying Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples, which were Japan's traditional religious centers. Hideyoshi issued an order to expel the missionaries and declared Japan as the land of the gods. After Hideyoshi's death, Tokugawa Ieyasu took power and began a 250-year-long persecution of Christians. At the height of this repression, Christians accounted for 1 in 5 people, making it impossible to simply wipe them out. So, the government used Buddhist temples to suppress Christianity. During this time, Buddhism spread rapidly, to the point where Buddhist temples could be found all over Japan. The government also implemented a system called Terauke, which required all citizens to register with a local Buddhist temple and receive a religious ID. This system, which would later evolve into Japan's family registry system, required that people carry their ID cards to get married, find work, or travel. Those who didn't comply were punished. Christians were also forced to step on images of Jesus in a test called Ifumi, which was used to root out secret Christians. Those who refused faced death, often by being tied to crosses in the tidal flats, where they would slowly drown as the tide came in. The torture methods used on Christians were incredibly brutal, and anyone who reported a Christian to the authorities would receive a reward. If one person in a group of 5 was found to be a Christian, all members of the group were punished, unless one of them acted as an informant. Families of Christians were marked with the Kiristan brand on their foreheads, and even those who converted faced scrutiny for generations. Descendants of Christians were not allowed to have proper funerals unless their bodies were free of the Christian brand. Many Buddhist temples in Japan have family graves attached to them, which explains why temples are often located near residential areas rather than in the mountains. It's estimated that around 200,000 people were martyred during this persecution. Christians who avoided capture, known as Kakure-Kirishiten, continued practicing their faith in secret, hiding in remote mountains or isolated islands for over 250 years. It wasn't until the mid-19th century, when Japan was forced to open its borders to the West, that the persecution of Christians finally ended with the lifting of the ban on Christianity. Following the Meiji Restoration, Japan's government established Shinto shrines across the country to promote the idea of the emperor as a living deity. Shinto has no founder or sacred texts and is based on Japan's indigenous beliefs, which are closely related to the country's traditional shamanism. It's a form of animism that recognizes millions of gods, and everything in nature, from mountains to rivers, from animals to objects, can be deified. This is why, even today, Shinto shrines are dedicated to all sorts of gods, including animals like cats and supernatural creatures like yokai. Even Emperor Hirohito is worshipped as a god at certain shrines, including the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, where war criminals from World War II are also enshrined. There are around 300,000 Shinto shrines in Japan, making them as common as temples or churches are in other countries. The large gates called torii that mark the entrances to these shrines can be seen all over Japan. In Japanese culture, people pray to these gods for health, success in studies or business, or even to conceive a child. These customs have been passed down for over 1,000 years, becoming an integral part of Japanese daily life. Japan has also seen the blending of Shintoism and Buddhism over time, to the point where the boundaries between the two religions have become blurred. People often turn to Buddhist temples for matters concerning the afterlife, while Shinto shrines handle concerns of the present life. Major life events such as weddings, New Year's celebrations, and coming-of-age ceremonies are often conducted at shrines. Japanese festivals, known as Matsuri, originate from Shinto rituals, and they've since evolved into major celebrations enjoyed by everyone. Although religion in Japan is more cultural than doctrinal, its influence on the country's identity is undeniable. After World War II, Japan's constitution mandated the separation of religion and politics, and religious education was banned from public schools. As a result, modern Japanese people tend to have little interest in organized religion, and most are more familiar with folk traditions than religious teachings. Temples in Japan don't offer the same tranquility as those in other countries, where visitors can experience the peaceful atmosphere of a temple stay. Instead, Japanese temples are often filled with souvenir shops and fortune tellers, making them feel more like tourist destinations than places of worship.